So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, should you glance at your programme, you'll see the next speaker is Amy Galea, Chief Primary Care Officer.
Just wait for the second.
Yep, all right. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Quiet, please. Quiet, quiet, quiet. It's the voice of authority. Right. Here we go. Glance at your programme and you'll see that the next speaker is Amy. Let's just be honest and say that when Amy phoned 48 hours ago to say that she was unable to come, we were a bit sad, we were quite upset, and if I'm brutally honest, we were also quite cross. However, Joe spent a lot of time talking to her yesterday. She was most apologetic, and we do understand that in health, sometimes circumstances arise and plans have to be changed. So we are sympathetic to her, and we're grateful that she's asked Gary Money, who's Director of Primary Care in Sussex, to come along and speak on her behalf. So Gary, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Hopefully this works and I don't do all the bad habits that I was just told about looking in the wrong direction or putting it too close to my mouth. So thank you very much for the invite. Yes, I'm not Amy, have much less hair, a bit more weight. I suppose every opportunity, so it's a great opportunity for me to get to meet so many of you face to face. Lots of you will have seen my name on emails or my face on a Teams call, and no doubt various vexing issues associated with my name and my face. One of my great regrets of my first year in post is that I haven't been able to get out as much as I did. It was one of the main reasons that I actually came to Sussex, because I was actually already Director of Primary Care back in South London, not quite the same patch as Richard, next door in South East London. But I live in Horsham, so I have a strong attachment to West Sussex, so the other side of the invisible lines, and not quite the coastal bit of the family, but the other side. And I've worked with GPs on and off for about 20 years. So, but I must say, in all that time, I haven't been to anything remotely of this scale when it comes to practice managers organising themselves. So it's quite something. This is something really special. And I think the institute concept, I know we've got other speakers from other parts later, is something that needs to be rolled out, because you guys do need to have that support and that infrastructure. I think it's interesting hearing about kind of practice managers and deputy practice managers and operational managers and PCM managers. I mean, that was part of what I was going to talk about in a moment, is actually what even is practice management. I mean, at some point you're going to be responsible for so many millions and so many interconnected webs. And at the moment, I think PCNs, when they first started, there was a lot of talk about host bank accounts, and I remember being involved at the very beginning of PCNs back where I came from, about the tax implications and the VAT and how you could close the books, and this other practice wasn't kind of playing along, and it was all just a bit of a nightmare. So I definitely think the complexity of the role is like nothing else. And I also think a lot of people in our side of the family, in the management world, so ICBs, PCTs, CCGs, probably wouldn't have the faintest idea what to do. If you put us inside your office and said, right, you've got to sort the payroll today, and you've got to work out this clinic thing over there, and someone hasn't turned up, and you've got to make sure that there's something the accountants have missed, and you've got to, I was just having a chat with Nigel, set up a vaccination centre when the number doesn't work and the login doesn't work, and you know, I don't think many of us could cope in that role. So it's probably something to reflect on about just the sheer volume of work that people in this room are responsible for. It was fun following on from Richard, who I know has left us now. I was sorely tempted to put my hand up at some point, but I suppose part of what I wanted to do was just to, I guess, talk about what the role of PMs is going forwards from a kind of ICB perspective. I think we all have our different roles to play, so BMA have a role, LMC have a role, obviously ICB/commissioners have a role. I mean, there are a lot of headwinds around us, so maybe just to sort of set the scene. Luckily, I don't have to repeat a lot of what was already said, but finances are extremely challenged in the NHS, and Sussex is just as much in that boat as anybody else. Budgets are very complicated. I know one of the things I've spent much of my last 20 years talking to practice managers about is what on earth pot of money pay for this or that. So we talked about Hugo's money earlier. You know, part of our role, I guess, is to be creative and to know what you want to happen in Sussex by talking to people that work there, and then use the opportunities that come your way to eke out bits of benefit. A good example was the dreaded laptops question, which I'm obviously happy when we come onto Q&A to talk about. But last year we got 450 laptops sent out using a pot of money that just came along. And it didn't have to be spent on that, but we knew that laptops was absolutely on fire, so that's what we used it for. And I suppose that's partly, I mean, Hugo's somewhere in the audience, he's moved around, but I mean, that's partly what Hugo and I spend a lot of our time talking about, is basically problems that come up and basically how do we solve them. There's obviously strikes, very pertinent today, because we're just coming out of the first double strike with junior doctors and consultants. It's very difficult. I mean, the electives keep getting cancelled over and over and over again. Those patients obviously come to you and your practices, because that's where most patients turn to. They turn to their practice, and if the council doesn't do this, or the hospital doesn't do that, and that kind of reflects the central role practices play, and therefore the central role you all play where you work. But it's probably not getting any better, if we're honest. We talked about workload. Part of that is just general practice absorbs a disproportionate amount of the noise and the problems in the system, because patients turn to you, and that's very difficult. The other thing, I guess, is change. So we talked about political change. I won't dwell on it, because I'm sure that's not top of your problem list, but yes, I am expecting the ICB to go through some changes between now and April. I think we'll probably be doing some comms out about that. I still fundamentally believe we'll have a primary care team. There always is, isn't there? Quite who's in it and what it looks like, etc., will obviously have a bit of change. Joe, you have, after many weeks of waiting, just had the organisational structure sent to you of our primary care team. That's one thing we can tick off the list. Let's just say I don't think it will quite look like that in April, but at least it gives you a few names now. Should say as well, as I'm Director of Primary Care for West Sussex, that in future I'll make sure that our West Sussex primary care team are here if the invite's open, because I do think it's a bit of a missed opportunity today for our PCN delivery managers. So the role of PMs, well, it'd be very patronising of me to tell you what the role of PMs are, because you know what being a PM means. I suppose for me, I just said how complex I think the role is, the kind of diversity of management roles. I think you're vital, and I think you've always been vital. I think you're going to be even more vital. They're words. I mean, if you're that vital, where's the support? I'm just going to say head on now at this point, we have secured funding for the West Sussex Practice Managers Association. But I am also very...
How many years did you say?
Let's just say 12 months for now. And I don't know whether the camera's on filming me, but
it is.
and that commitment will go to Brighton and Hove and East Sussex colleagues, who obviously are equally important as well. I don't know if we've got any East Sussex people here, but obviously I know Brighton and Hove. So there will be the necessary emails going out in the next week or two. So please get in touch with me if you feel like there's a delay. Sometimes we don't always get our emails out when we're supposed to. I didn't want to particularly come in and give the opposite view to Richard's last talk, because I thought he was extremely eloquent and he highlighted so many challenges that are real. I suppose what I was really going to say is that the ICB has a slightly different role. So nobody wants to see staff burnt out, nobody wants to see pathways broken and patients come to harm, nobody wants to see you working in decrepit, cramped premises without a laptop, with your desktop having been taken away. You know, and all the various other things that you need to be able to do the job, you know, because there's no point you being inspirational people if you then don't have the tools, and neither do your teams. We do have a whole population role. It's one of the roles we adopt, so, you know, part of the BMA safe working guidance obviously is if the patient gets told to call 111, that's still our problem. And if 111 tell them to go to the hospital, that's still our problem. You know, so that's part of the role we play, is to try to see how it plays out, I suppose. So we all want patients to be cared for. We all want staff to be safe. I mean, who wouldn't want safe working, you know? But I think we need to sort of understand how successful have we been as an ICB in supporting practices, PCs and federations, and what else can we do? And it's nice having Nick here, because Nick and I have had a couple of thoughtful chats in the past, and I think, Joe, we need to do more of that with practice management leaders to work out what do we do next, whether we have a pot of money or not. Let's assume that pots of money come along, because they do tend to. We mentioned we're in election year. Sometimes the money tree dislodges things nearer to the election date, doesn't it? We also need to recognise, I guess, the sort of middleman role we play with national. So, as you know, often things get announced nationally. Sometimes ICBs don't get an awful lot of forewarning, and then we have to adapt. A great example is the vaccination campaign, where we've had some wonderful meetings, haven't we, with you all in the last couple of weeks about the new date. I mean, you know, 2 or 3 months ago, we weren't even sure what cohort, weren't sure if anyone was going to sign the enhanced service, weren't sure how much it was going to be worth. I mean, the finances literally changed overnight, didn't they? You know, suddenly